Yeah, very inspiring talks. That's hard to follow up with. So yeah, I'm Theo. Good morning, everybody. And I'd like to touch upon a point from yesterday, which was about the techno-utopian grand vision that most of us are sharing and that we are working towards to. But then I also really like the thought, and I would like to reinforce this idea of taking concrete steps and kind of starting lean, starting agile, and really taking this step by step. Because I feel like that's what's needed to really make this space get traction in the real world. So one thing I would like to argue for here is that we as a community really should focus our resources as a whole to pick a priority and then channel our resources towards that. And we touched upon yesterday on competition in this space, and that it's perhaps not supposed to be. I mean, we always have politics, of course, but I feel like we could, especially in this early stage, collaborate a lot more and share, since the code is open to share, but then it's just politics that's keeping us from doing so. And another point I'd like to make is that we should apply our solutions where it really matters, and thinking about where we can really have an impact. That leads me to my role at GIZ Blockchain Lab currently. So GIZ, that's the German development agency, kind of funded by the German government and implementing all kinds of projects in developing countries. And of course, you can have your own opinion about development aid, and yes, good and bad things about that. And people are aware of that. And I think, especially coming from the DGOV space, I feel like blockchain can make a big difference in this whole system of, in the worst case, imposing certain structures, but then in a better scenario, giving people the self-sovereign authority and the ability to take part in governance. So I really think that this space can make a big difference. And coming back to where it really matters, I feel like we can create a huge impact if we look at developing countries and look at where can we implement small pilots that really tackle solutions, tackle problems that are there today. I mean, so when we look at the technology today and the problems we face with big tech monopolies, obviously we care about that a lot, but then from my experience that is multiplied a lot when there are no strong institutions, when the people cannot trust the legal system, when people cannot trust privacy laws, all these things. So sure, it's not cool what's happening in Germany, but then if you look at an authoritarian state where the internet is just shut down before the elections, or if you look at Facebook being pre-installed on mobile devices and being the only platform used for communications, and we could continue here, I feel like that should be a priority for the whole tech and innovation sector, and I think especially with our background, with our projects, we can make a big difference here. So our lab is fortunate enough to have government funding, so we don't really care about business models, and we can truly embrace this crypto for good theme. And we kind of align our mission by the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations. And I feel like that also gives us a really powerful and validated framework to structure our resources and channel them in the right ways. Because, again, as much as I appreciate all of our visionary thoughts and thinking, I feel like it would make much sense to really channel them a bit. So, yeah, and also I'd like to argue again for really taking the agile methodology. So in this lab format that we're having, you have to imagine GIZ Blockchain Lab is part of GIZ, which used to be a government ministry. Now it's kind of outsourced, but it's still very much shaped and influenced by those corporate or bureaucratic traditions. So it's really unheard of, if you want to say so, to have this lab format in our context. Of course, in the startup field, it's much more common to have these methodologies. Still, I feel like, especially coming from these visionary thoughts, we should take this step forward and really think about concrete steps. And so to give you a few examples, what we've been involved with is, for example, educational credentials in Mongolia, where we empower individuals to have these certificates verifiable through a QR code from wherever, by whoever, without having the institution locally there to be required to, and without them being able to tamper with the certificates. And this is obviously works cross-border. Also, we're working in Georgia with land registries to avoid corruption and kind of keep individuals, preserve their rights. Another interesting case is decentralized insurance through oracles, which we are working in India with like local farmers. So, for example, if there's a monsoon, we could have IoT-enabled oracles that instantly release funding, whereas today it takes multiple months to release funding, which destroys individuals' lives. Another idea, another concept, we are currently applying for funding for our peer-to-peer energy grids in Nigeria, and then adding blockchain to that. So that is a really exciting case, especially Nigeria, which is a huge country, as all of you know. Also, sustainable supply chain in Sri Lanka, that's another project that is currently starting. And the most exciting out of all, what's still early stage, but what I'm really keen for is social impact bonds and tokenizing them. So not sure if you guys are familiar with social impact bonds. That is kind of the idea of, so you invest in a cause, the government announces that there is a cause that should be supported, but then the funding is only released or partly released depending on the impact that is actually achieved. So in the end, this is a collaboration between governments, private investors, and NGOs who work as implementing actors, and then the private partners take some of the risk. So if the impact is achieved or overachieved, they earn more money. They can make a lot of money, in fact. Although if the impact is not achieved, they might make a loss. So I feel like this is a really nice way to incentivize impact. And then tokenizing that, we can talk about this in detail later, but it takes a lot of, makes this process more efficient and also removes some intermediaries who kind of add friction to the system. So that's what I'm personally really excited for. So if you have ideas, let me know. The point I'm trying to make here also is that many of us might look down on existing institutions as kind of being barriers to where we want to go. And you might be right. But then I feel like taking a pragmatic view, it makes much sense to collaborate with them and also to just use existing channels. So, for example, at GIZ, we are in 120 countries. We have local offices, and people in these local offices often have been working there for many, many years, and they know people, they know politics, they know local technology providers. So these are just very effective ways of implementing things. And coming back to my point of taking concrete steps, I feel like this is a really interesting way to make a real impact. And I would like to invite you all to join this thought of channeling our resources and making impact where it really matters. Thank you.